Tensions in the Middle East were on the table during high-level talks at the White House last night. U.S. President Donald Trump hosted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and while Trump says he's optimistic he can get a ceasefire deal done, he had this to say about the future of the region.
Do you think that there can be a two-state solution that creates an independent?
I don't know. I'd ask Bibi that question.
So Netanyahu didn't rule out the possibility of a two-state solution, but said a Palestinian state would never have control over security. Joining me now is Jon Allen, former ambassador to Israel and a senior fellow at the Bill Graham Center for Contemporary History. Good morning, Jon. Good to see you this morning. So I think a lot of people were expecting that a ceasefire deal might be announced yesterday by President Trump. That didn't happen. There still seems to be a lot of challenges in reaching an agreement. Do you feel something is close?
I do feel something is close. Steve Witkoff, his Middle East envoy, is going to be traveling to Qatar, probably to try and seal the deal. There's a couple of outstanding issues on the temporary ceasefire. Who's going to be delivering the humanitarian aid, whether it's going to continue to be this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which has been disaster in terms of lives lost and getting the food distributed, or whether it'll be UN organizations and international NGOs. And then there's a question of where the Israeli troops are going to withdraw to. But I think those issues will probably be resolved, and you'll have a temporary ceasefire.
A temporary ceasefire, which would see the return of hostages and the bodies of deceased hostages. Netanyahu wants to see Hamas unarmed and give up power, ultimately. Why would Hamas agree to that?
Well, Hamas says it won't agree to it, and that's the third element of the temporary ceasefire and the real heart of ending the conflict permanently. As you said, Prime Minister Netanyahu and his cabinet want Hamas to surrender, give up their arms, and go into exile. Hamas says that it won't give up its arms, but it's prepared to have a technocratic government come into the Gaza Strip and run the Strip. And that's ultimately going to determine how the conflict ends finally.
Right, and that is the question then. Who controls Gaza in the future?
Yes, well, there is an Egyptian/Arab plan that foresees a Gulf-centered military moving in once Hamas and the IDF have stopped fighting each other, and a force that would bring rule of law back to Gaza, and humanitarian aid to flow in massive amounts, and reconstruction, tent cities at first, and then reconstruction subsequently. So there are plans, including having the Palestinian Authority from the West Bank eventually begin to govern there. But we have to see an end to the conflict first before anything can be done on the ground.
Yeah, and the hostages returned. I want to ask you lastly on Netanyahu's sort of surprise announcement to Donald Trump that he was nominating Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, given his involvement in what's happening in the Middle East. You want to react to that?
Another example of Netanyahu ingratiating himself to Trump to try and get out of Trump as much as he can. It's ironic that somebody who has been indicted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes in Gaza is nominating President Trump, who is incredibly desirous of that Nobel Peace Prize, for the prize. It's classic Netanyahu and classic Trump in that sense.
Jon Allen is the former ambassador to Israel, and he's a senior fellow at the Bill Graham Center for Contemporary History. Thanks for your time with us this morning.